dear Father, and whatever will be said and done, dear Father God, that it will be done, O God, in a decency and in order, dear Father God. Continue to have your divine way throughout these meetings, Lord. In your name I pray. Amen. Remain standing as we have the national anthem.
Saint Vincent, land so beautiful, with joyful hearts we pledge to thee our loyalty and love, and vow to keep you ever free. Whate'er the future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us true. High moon of fair and blessed are your mountains, high so clear and green, a home to me, though I may stray, a haven calm, serene. Whate'er the future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us true. Our little sister islands are those gems, the lovely grenadines upon their seas, and golden sands the sunshine ever beam. Whate'er the future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us true.
Thank you very much. You may have your seats. I'll now turn over to Miss Janiel Miller-Finley, the National Ozone Officer of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who will bring us opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Brenton. I'm sure that most of you didn't know that that was me singing just now. That was just wishful thinking. Director of Planning, Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning, Sustainable Development, and Information Technology, my director, Laura Anthony Brown. Mr. Osborne Bowens, Dean of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College Technical Division, Division of Technical Vocational Education, media representatives, good morning. To our visiting delegates, Mr. Gerard Mitissa of the Ozone Secretariat, Mr. Marco Pinzon, Donalyn Charles, and Kevin Rodriguez of the UN Environment Regional Office of Latin America and the Caribbean, Paloma of UNDP, United Nations Development Program, Mr. Brenton Kwame, National Assistant Ozone Officer, fellow ozone officers of the region of the English-speaking Caribbean and Haiti. Many of you, I know it's the first time you're visiting St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Hairuna, land of the blessed, and the gem of the Antilles. Welcome. It is our privilege to host you and to have you in our country. We know that for some as well, it's the first, I think, for Gerard and Misha, it's the first that you've been to the region of the Caribbean. So we are happy to be your CARICOM ambassadors. I want to, this morning, just in this brief welcoming remarks, just to salute you, my fellow Ozone officers. You are what Leslie would have mentioned many times, and I agree with, the unsung heroes of environmental protection. Your contribution to the repair of the ozone layer, which helps to sustain life on Earth, has been remarkable, and it's something that you don't often hear about. Over the past 30 years of the implementation of the Montreal Protocol, our roles have evolved from being guardians of the ozone layer to becoming climate and energy specialists. Our phase-out schedules have made an invaluable contribution to the fight against climate change, leading to emission reductions of over 10 gigatons of CO2 equivalent per year, 5 times larger than that of the annual emissions in the reductions under the Kyoto Protocol between the years of 2008 to 2012. As I said before, we are honored to host you, and we are encouraged by the level of support that we have seen in terms of the attendance to this meeting, representatives from the Ozone Secretariat, Ozone Action, UNEP, the other UN agencies, and other partner agencies. Welcome to St. Vincent, and we would have had 2 days of training for the new ozone officers that were quite successful, and I anticipate that same level of success and interaction, discussions for the 3 days that we have following. At this point, I would like to welcome Ms. Laura Anthony Brown. Sorry, I think it's Marco, my apologies. Marco Pinzon, who is representing the Regional Office of Latin America and the Caribbean, to make brief remarks.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Misha Tushishvili. I am working in Ozone Action Paris office. And on behalf of the Ozone Action of the United Nations Environment Program, I would like to warmly welcome and express my sincere gratitude to the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines for the acceptance and great support in the organization of this meeting. I would like to touch in my opening remarks also 3 main subjects, and one of them it was already mentioned. I am very happy to report to this network that, as we promised 2 years ago, the first NOU training program, which was created by United Nations Environment Program, Ozone Action Paris, in cooperation with our team in Panama, was successfully held on Monday and Tuesday here in St. Vincent and Grenadines. And the objective of this training program was to provide a new NOU staff with essential information about the Montreal Protocol, a country's obligations under the Montreal Protocol, and the main activities with regard to the project implementation at the national level. I would like to thank you here, host country, St. Vincent and Grenadines, for the excellent support in organizing that meeting. And of course, my sincere thanks to our resource person from Grenada, Leslie. Again, thank you very much for your excellent participation in that meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, this network meeting provides us with a very useful platform to exchange information, ideas, and experiences in implementation of the HPMP. The second topic what I would like to mention here is that we see that HCFC phase-out management plans continue to be challenged for some of the NOUs in the region, since the managing of HCFC phase-out process, setting up supporting policies and legislation, implementing HPMP components such as the investment and non-investment components, making informed choices about non-HCFC technologies is a really complex task. UNEP has a huge responsibility in most of these areas, and we would like to emphasize that we are ready to continue providing capacity building services, the information clearinghouse and regional networking, all our core services which are supporting HCFC phase out at the national level. And another very important point that needs to be highlighted here is that the Kigali Amendment changed heavily landscape under the Montreal Protocol, and which basically bring about a global phase down of HFCs, and we will take effect from 1st January to 2019. Therefore, there is a need to initiate activities at the national level as soon as possible. The Executive Committee agreed to provide fast start supporting for countries that had formally indicated their intent to ratify the Kigali Amendment. And Article 5 countries, including the Caribbean network, were invited to propose enabling activities projects to facilitate and support the early ratification of the Kigali Amendment, and to undertake specific initial activities that help them fulfill their initial obligation with regard to HFC phase down in line with the Kigali Amendment. And I can assure you that UNEP and as well as other sister implementing agencies are ready to support Article 5 countries with setting up enabling environment for Kigali implementation. With this, I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratefulness to partner agencies, UNDP and UNIDO, as well as bilateral partners, governments of US and Canada, for outstanding cooperation and excellent partnership with this Caribbean network. On behalf of Ozone Action of United Nations Environment Program, I wish you a most successful network meeting, and I thank you for active participation in advance.
Thank you very much, Misha. I thought it was important for you to speak on behalf of our Chief Officer in Paris, Misha Milanair. Ms. Laura Anthony Brown, Director of Planning, Ministry of Finance, Economy, Planning, Sustainable Development and Information Technology. Ms. Janelle Miller, National Ozone Officer of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. National Ozone Officers from the Caribbean countries, special guests, implementing agencies of the Multilateral Fund, the Ozone Secretariat, the US EPA, ladies and gentlemen. During the last 2 days, I have just jotted down some little history that I want to share with you. More than 30 years ago, a group of governments agreed to protect the ozone layer. Later on, it was a universal agreement in order to phase out the ozone-depleting substances, those harmful chemicals used in a variety of applications, but mainly in the refrigeration and air conditioning sectors. We remember that the signature of this remarkable agreement was preceded by a series of scientific research and evidence of its depletion, while at the same time it was the discovery of the ozone hole over Antarctica. It is worth mentioning that during the lifetime of the Montreal Protocol and its amendments, nearly 2 million of cases of skin cancer are avoided annually, according to research made by the World Health Organization. In addition, the complete phase-out of CFCs, solvent, halogens, and methyl bromide have contributed to the avoidance of around 11 billion CO2 equivalent tons of emissions per year. Experts estimated that this amount of avoided emissions was equivalent to more than 3 Kyoto protocols. During the past 10 years or so, parties realized that all these efforts and associated benefits could be lost if the alternatives used, namely the HFCs with high global warming potential, increase their production and consumption globally. Again, scientists have brought up research and evidence on this regard. The good news, as you all know, is that in 2016, parties agreed to control HFCs under the Montreal Protocol mechanism. Therefore, as Misha just mentioned, all subsidiary bodies, including the United Nations Environment Program, as implementing agency to the Montreal Protocol, are adjusting its processes and structures to face or to address the new challenges that Kigali has brought to the table. This meeting, followed by the training of new national ozone officers, will start addressing one of these key challenges, namely that of trade control of HFCs using environmental licensing system, electronic licensing system. Existing licensing system that needs to be adjusted, and with technology we may use and enhance our licensing system with electronic controls. And we will be doing this together with the customs officers. The Caribbean region has demonstrated its commitment with the Montreal Protocol, and once again is advancing the work to be done and the strategies to be put in place in order to control HFCs once the Kigali Amendment is ratified by individual parties. From this region, it is important to note that 2 countries have already ratified Kigali Amendment, and the majority are well progressing in doing so. Therefore, I invite all of you to actively participate during these 3 days with the aim to prepare your countries for HFC controls and shaping the phase-down strategies. The United Nations Environment and its Compliance Assistance Program will provide you with the necessary support under its mandate to guide you and work with you in this endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marco. I would like to recognize the presence of Minister of National Mobilization, Social Development, Family, Gender Affairs, Persons with Disabilities, and Youth, and former member of the National Ozone Committee, Minister Frederick Stevenson. Welcome, we are happy to have you. And I'll now invite Mrs. Laura Anthony Brown, Director of Planning, to give the opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Good morning to everyone. I recognize the accepted protocol, but I want to add in, because he wasn't recognized before, my dear friend and colleague and minister in our Ministry of National Mobilization. I'm particularly pleased to see that we have ministerial representation at this opening ceremony this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure, I know you have been welcomed already, but it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this thematic meeting of the National Ozone Officers of the English-speaking Caribbean and Haiti. We have here assembled, as I have come in and observed you, quite an impressive gathering of CARICOM member countries, in addition to organizations such as the Ozone Secretariat, UN and regional agencies, and some private companies as well. I also want to recognize the representation from as an invited guest from the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College. It is good that we have this collaboration in this important aspect of our work. I want to offer to you greetings from our Minister, Honorable Camila Gonzalez, who would have liked to have been here with us today, but he is away attending the annual Board of Governors meeting of the Caribbean Development Bank, which begins today in Grenada. I know that looking at the program that you have set out ahead of you, that you do have a very hectic program, but it is in, and trust me when I say this, it is in your best interest to, while you are here, to take some time to visit explore our beautiful archipelago. And amidst the work that you're doing, explore some of our diversity and the hospitality that our country has to offer. At any rate, if you believe that you are too busy during this particular workshop, I invite you to come again one day with your families so you can really explore and enjoy the beauty of our country. Just over 2 years ago, in our country, the Economic Planning and the Sustainable Development Unit, which is where I work out of the Ministry of Finance, we assumed responsibility for environmental matters also. That arrangement commenced an incredible journey in which I entered into a classroom of never-ending education in my attempts to become familiar again with the basic geography and basic science that I learned, as you can tell, many, many years ago at school. I had to do so, and this reorientation was necessary if I wanted to be able to be on the same page whenever Janelle walked into my office to brief me on what she was doing. For example, if she came in and she would say that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is one of 9 countries, 9 of the Caribbean, of 197 countries that have stage 1 accelerated phase-out management plan for the HCFS. And, HCFS. And only in the region, we are the only one in the LAC, Latin America, and the Caribbean region. So when she gave me information such as that, having taken some time to reacclimatize myself, so to speak, with long-forgotten basic science and the geography, at least I had some intuition as to what she was speaking about. Indeed, when the Montreal Protocol, which you know better than I do, Montreal Protocol is the global agreement to protect the ozone layer by phasing out the production and consumption of ozone-depleting substances. When this was finalized in 1987, there may have been, at the time I suspect, many people who were skeptical, doubtful about the ability of participating countries to make real progress in this regard. Today, just over 30 years later, since the coming into effect of this agreement, it is heartening to see and to understand that the Montreal Protocols, when I read, for example, that the Montreal Protocols Scientific Assessment Panel estimates that with implementation of the Montreal Protocol, the world can expect near complete recovery of the ozone layer by the mid-21st century. This, by any measurement, is an impressive outcome. I say that it is impressive based on my basic understanding that without the layer of ozone in the atmosphere, it would be difficult, if not impossible, for anything to survive on Earth's surface. And I thought about that in particular, this morning. If you are an early riser and you looked out of your windows at 5:15 a.m. and even as late as 5:30, there was the most brilliant moonlight, and I was amazed at that, and I thought, of the interactions of the environment, and I because I was thinking about this topic, I wondered to what extent all of that and their interaction with Earth would be possible if we weren't protecting the ozone layer. So this success is due mainly to the country-driven approach. This is what I've been advised that the success in being able, by the middle of the 21st century, to attain near 100% recovery is due mainly to the approach to the implementation of the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer, and the establishment also of national ozone units. I know that sometimes when I speak with my team, and I hear it here, they feel as though they are the stepchildren in the whole development process. But I want it to be known that certainly within our economic planning and the Sustainable Development Unit, they are very much integrated in the work that the country is trying to do. I am advised that there are 147 national ozone units established, and they are able to function to the extent that they receive support through multilateral fund, the Multilateral Fund Secretariat, the finance arm of the Montreal Protocol. In this regard, I want to publicly commend the Ozone Action Office for its role in assisting countries in achieving and maintaining compliance for its continued program of work dedicated to enhancing the work of the national ozone officers and units. The Ozone Action Office must also be congratulated for initiating the training program, which you have participated in, many of you, over these last 2 days that you were in our beautiful country. The training of new ozone officers, as you know, is a new aspect of the UN Environmental Action Compliance Program. And we are particularly pleased that this network of the English-speaking Caribbean region is the first to have received this training. We are indeed pioneers because it is the first time that the module is being tested. I am pleased that we have been chosen as host, our country as host to this pioneering activity. In that regard, then, I'd like to present the certificates of the identification cards before taking my seat. So I'll ask Janelle to call the names, not at this point, at the end of those who will receive certificates from the training. Before I do that, handing over of the certificates, I'd like to reflect on what happens as we move forward. For us here in our country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, having successfully phased out ozone-depleting substances, national ozone offices must also work with the broader planning community, which includes the central planning, that's another part of our office, the Ministry of Trade, Legal Affairs, Finance, Customs, and the whole series. It is my observation, and I've been around long enough to make observations such as these, and it is my observation that in general, environmental staff are somewhat reluctant to completely integrate others into their work. From my experience, integration of other critical disciplines into the work of environmentalists is critical for the success of that sustainable development agenda. In that regard, then, I can say that the integration which has taken place in our country of bringing the Sustainable Development Unit, the environmental aspect, into the Ministry of Finance is a step in the right direction. And I know sometimes the environmental people come kicking and screaming because you think that finance people don't necessarily understand, and sometimes we don't. But you have to help us, you have to teach us, and you have to make us understand that, listen, we are in this thing, developmental thing together, and without one, the other will suffer. I know that the work of the Ozone Office has evolved over the last 30 years or so. Thus, Ozone officers, as Janelle mentioned, have become more integrated and are keepers of the environment, not just protectors of the ozone layer. In this regard, then, the entry into force, as we think forward, of the Kigali Amendment in January is another important thread in this environmental protection thrust. The implementation of this amendment is poised to complement the Paris Agreement, helping to reduce CO2 emissions and making the below 2 degrees target more attainable. You know, just as a segue, you know, when we speak about the whole aspect of climate change and the impact it has, say, on coastal erosion, scientists like to say in very scientific terms that we are losing how much degrees or how much meters of land per year and so on. And I say to them, what you're saying there is all quite interesting, but I am able to appreciate that at one point in my life, if we use St. Vincent and the Grenadines as an example, I knew that you had land at this point, and now I see land at this point. So I can see it with my naked eyes over the years that something is happening. I'm happy that somebody can explain it in a very scientific manner and say, if it is not halted, then we are in for serious trouble. So I make the same point in respect of the reduction of the CO2 emissions. I want to just say also that our country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, has begun the groundwork towards the ratification of the Kigali Amendment, and I heard the plea for us all to move with some speed in trying to complete that. But I expect that we would get there before the end of this year, 2018, or maybe very early in 2019. And what a wonderful achievement it will be if all of our countries here represented can so notify that we have ratified in the not too distant future. So with that, as I indicated earlier, we can do the presentations for those who have completed the training. I want to congratulate you most sincerely, but I also want to end by wishing you every success in today's meeting and the rest of the time that you have here. And I invite you, as I said at the beginning, to come again to enjoy the diversity of what we call Haroon, land of the blessed, the gem of the Antilles.
Okay, these certificates are going to be presented to 4 of our technicians who were trained in Grenada last year. We have the UNIDO project that some countries of the region are participating in, which is St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Bahamas, Grenada, and Suriname. And through that project, that cooperation, all of those countries had at least 4 officers trained. And while we are embarking on the implementation or the ratification of the Kigali Amendment, we know how important it is to have standards developed and to have the necessary training for our technicians so that when we get to that phase where we are using the alternatives, which have different, flammability and toxicity and things like that, that they have the necessary training so that we ensure that the transition is as smooth as it was when we transitioned from CFCs. So I would just like to read to you what this this badge and this certificate says. It says, for successfully completing the assessment for real alternatives flammable refrigerants. And the assessment was carried out by an authorized training provider, which is Centro Studio Galileo, and it's an institute that is from the EU, based in Italy. And this card, this small card, which we are all hoping to one day have in the region in terms of our technicians, it says that, for example, Mr. Andrew Brian Miller, with a lot of other details, is certified in accordance with Regulation CE 303/2008 as operator of stationary refrigeration, air conditioning, and heat pump equipment containing certain fluorinated greenhouse gases category 1. And this certificate is valid in the European Union after registration with the Italian National Institute, and it has the various classes and categories. So we want to commend those who would have successfully gone through the training, because we know we really want to see other technicians follow suit so that we formalize this, not so formal industry, and that we move in the correct direction. So with the assistance of our director and Minister Stevenson, we'd like to
I'll just hand them to Minister and he will hand them over. Is it first Bruno Els? Bruno Els. Mr. Gary Peters, who is also our national trainer. And Mr. Wayne Grant. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
So that concludes our opening ceremony. We'll just have 5 minutes break so that we can, reorganize the room, and then we'll go into the substantive, day's proceedings. Thank you very much.